Defying orders, the Canadian commander who shook imperial power one piece of paper. A single day. And the quiet collapse of imperial authority. September 1944. As Allied armor pushes deeper into Europe and headlines focus on the road toward Berlin, something far less visible is unfolding behind the scenes. On a desk inside a Canadian headquarters lies an envelope, unremarkable in appearance, but explosive in consequence. Inside is an ultimatum sent by the most influential British field commander operating in Europe. Its meaning is unmistakable: issue an apology, or your command, and your career, will be terminated. What the British command fails to grasp is that this is no longer a conversation between empire and colony. The man reading the letter is not a subordinate awaiting instruction. He is about to challenge the very structure of wartime authority during the largest conflict the world has ever seen. What follows unfolds rapidly. Less than a minute. A single reply. One carefully chosen message. And suddenly, the British Empire discovers it no longer dictates every move on the board. This is the story of the moment Canada stopped accepting London's authority by default, and began asserting its own. To understand why this confrontation mattered, we need to understand the personalities involved. On one side stands Bernard Law Montgomery, Monty, Britain's most celebrated general. After the disaster at Dunkirk and years of strategic frustration, Montgomery delivered something Britain desperately needed: victory. In North Africa in 1942, he crushed Rommel's forces and transformed morale across the British Isles. His reputation was built not only on success but certainty. Montgomery projected confidence, discipline, and control. But that control came with a price. He tolerated no dissent. Orders were not to be questioned. Loyalty meant obedience. Any challenge was seen not as debate, but defiance. Opposite him stood the Canadian commander. He was not theatrical. He avoided headlines. But he was precise, disciplined, and deeply conscious of the country he represented. As commander of the 1st Canadian Army, he led more than 175,000 troops, the largest force Canada had ever placed in the field. And these were not inexperienced soldiers. By 1944, Canadian forces were battle-tested veterans. They had fought through Italy's brutal terrain, stormed Juno Beach on D-Day, and liberated towns at enormous human cost. Casualties were staggering. Experience was earned the hard way. Canada had paid its dues. Yet to Montgomery, Canadian units were still pieces within a larger British-controlled strategy, assets to be positioned, not partners to be consulted. Then comes September 1944. The Allied advance begins to stall. Supply lines are strained. Fuel and ammunition are scarce. Decisions now carry enormous consequences. Montgomery summons a high-level planning conference. Attendance is mandatory. Every senior commander is expected to be present. But one chair remains empty. The Canadian commander does not appear. Instead, he travels to the coast of northern France, specifically to the beaches of Dieppe. To understand why this mattered, we have to go back 2 years earlier. August 19, 1942. Canadian forces launch a raid against the heavily defended port of Dieppe. The objective is reconnaissance and experimentation. The result is catastrophe. Within hours, nearly 1,000 Canadians are killed. Thousands more are wounded or captured. The assault collapses in chaos. The beaches are littered with wreckage and loss. Dieppe becomes a national trauma. A wound that never fully heals. For the Canadian commander, the memory is personal. And on the 2nd anniversary of the disaster, he makes a deliberate decision. He will be there. He will honor the dead. Even if it means ignoring Montgomery's summons. When word reaches British headquarters, Montgomery erupts. In the middle of an active campaign, with German resistance still fierce, a senior commander has missed a critical meeting for a memorial ceremony. Montgomery interprets it as insubordination. Worse, as a direct challenge to his authority. He responds swiftly. A letter is drafted. The tone is clinical and final. The Canadian general is to be removed from command and reassigned to England. The implication is clear: his career is finished. What Montgomery does not anticipate is the response. He expects compliance, regret, an apology. That is how imperial systems had functioned for generations. Instead, the Canadian commander sits down calmly and writes back. His reply does not beg. It does not explain. It does not retreat. In essence, his message is this: you may remove me if you wish, but understand who I answer to. My authority comes from the Canadian government. And if you choose to dismiss me, you will be required to explain that decision to Ottawa. Explain it to Ottawa. This single line changes everything. Historians later refer to it as playing the Ottawa card. And it is a political maneuver as powerful as any battlefield tactic. The message forces Montgomery to confront an inconvenient reality. Canada is no longer a colony. Its army is funded by Canadian taxpayers. Its soldiers are raised by a sovereign government. Its commanders answer to elected leadership in Ottawa, not to British field marshals. This is not 1914. Not even 1939. By 1944, Canada has declared war independently, conducts its own diplomacy, and maintains its own chain of command. If Montgomery proceeds, the issue becomes international. Newspapers erupt. Parliament demands answers. Churchill is forced to intervene. The unity of the Allied coalition, already fragile, comes under strain. Montgomery recognizes the consequences. And so, quietly, he retreats. No announcement is made. No apology issued. The incident is buried in official files, classified and forgotten by the public. But the message is received. Across Allied leadership, it becomes clear: Canadian forces will not be treated as subordinate extensions of empire. For Canadian soldiers on the front lines, the effect is immediate. Pride surges. Their leadership has stood firm, and won. Back in Ottawa, political leaders see confirmation of something they have worked toward for decades. Canada's independence is not symbolic. It is real. And for Britain, the moment is sobering. The empire is changing. The dominions are no longer dependents. In the months that follow, Canadian forces will liberate the Netherlands under brutal conditions, suffering heavy losses. They will be honored not as British auxiliaries, but as Canadians, distinct, sovereign, respected. When the war ends, Canada does not sit in Britain's shadow. Canadian diplomats helped shape the United Nations, NATO, and the post-war global order. The path from that letter in September 1944 to Canada's emergence as a middle power is direct. And that is why this story still matters. Because it reveals a fundamental truth: respect is rarely granted willingly. It is claimed. The Canadian commander could have apologized. He could have preserved his career by submission. Instead, he chose principle over comfort, and national dignity over personal security. For generations, imperial systems relied on obedience. But by 1944, the world had shifted. One man understood that before the system did. And when that letter arrived on Montgomery's desk, the balance changed. This was not about a missed meeting. Not just about Dieppe. It was about whether Canada would continue to accept a subordinate role, or insist on equality. That decision reshaped the nation's future. So when you think of Canadian military history, look beyond the famous battles. Think about a quiet command tent in September 1944. Think about the moment a Canadian general faced the Empire and said, "Not anymore." That is when Canada stopped being a dominion and started being a nation.